going to be looking at how a strong start can help us build a more equal society. As we celebrate 25 years of independence, we remember those magic moments in our history. Do you remember this one? Who could forget? When Frank Fredericks won the 200 meters and brought home the gold medal, our very first. Does anyone here think that Frank would agree to have his starting blocks 10 meters behind the starting line? Or 5 meters behind the starting line? Or 1 meter behind the starting line? Of course not, because Frank knows that a strong start is what you need for success. A strong start is what you need for a good finish. And you know what? The same thing is true in life. The first 1,000 days of life, from conception to 2, are absolutely fundamental for the development of a child, for the child's health, the child's well-being, and even the child's future prosperity. The first 1,000 days of life lay down the architecture of the brain. The first 1,000 days of life are a period of growth and development and a window of opportunity that makes all the difference to that child. I'm not talking theoretically. I'm not even talking as an educator. I'm talking about what the latest science of brain development is telling us. Look at this slide. Based on brain imaging, which has only become possible very recently. The bottom axis is the year of the child, the age of the child, and those colored lines are different aspects of brain development. And what do we see? We see that all aspects of brain development are peaking and developing well before the child is 4 years old. And in fact, in many cases, in the first year of life. You might have already known that hearing and vision, the green line and the dark purple line, develop very early in a child, in the first year of life. And the same is true of language, the yellow line. It develops well before a child goes to school. So it was so great this afternoon to be hearing about the importance of early literacy. We do need to start early. But what surprised me when I saw this slide for the first time is that even areas like peer skills, social development, emotional development are being established at a very young age, before the child goes to any kindergarten, while still at home. Although a baby is born with all its brain cells, 100 billion of them, the connections between those neurons are established in the first years of life. And those connections come from a stimulating and caring environment. If the brain is not fed and stimulated in those very early days of life and years of life, we are depriving that child of a healthy development. The newborn brain, listen to this is so interesting. The newborn brain uses 97% of the energy that child takes in. A 4-year-old's brain is only using 44% of the energy that child takes in. So imagine what happens if a child is malnourished. Stress and undernourishment will mean that there's a reduced energy to develop those brain functions that you see here in this slide. And what happens then? We unintentionally increase the inequalities in our society from this very early start. And studies have shown us that children with poor nutrition, lack of stimulation, excessive exposure to violence or stress will finish fewer grades in school, will earn less, and will have poorer health than their well-nourished peers. This is not acceptable, and it is not something we can afford in our country. We need to act now if we want to have a more equal society, if we want to ensure our children reach their full potential and become the Franks and the Saras and the Natumbos of tomorrow. I'd like to show you a few statistics that I believe are important for our new government as they enter their own first 1,000 days to consider. About 10,000 infants every year are born exposed to HIV. Now, fortunately, because we have a very successful prevention of mother-to-child transmission program, they will not necessarily be HIV positive, but they will be exposed to HIV. And we know that they and their families may need extra support. We also know that 24% of the children in our country are stunted, and that means short for their age due to chronic malnutrition. And remember what we said, 97% of the energy of a child goes to brain development, and they need that energy. 36% of the children in our country are not living with a biological parent, not a mother, not a father. And in some regions, this statistic is as high as 52%. And this is a potential risk factor. In other countries, studies have shown, especially for girls' health, not to be living with their mother. Another worrying thing is that the children who may need it most are not the ones who are going to be attending an early childhood development program such as a kindergarten. And the quality of the early childhood programs, the kindergartens and the preschools in our country are not equal. A mother, a domestic worker in Koreangava or any other informal settlement near us may have to leave her child when she goes to work with a neighbor who's caring for 8 other babies. They're in a room, on a bed, in a dark room, receiving the minimal attention that's needed for physical comfort, but not the stimulation you need for brain development. This is detrimental to the health and development of those children. And finally, what is the result of this? Well, the result is that 1 in 5 children in grade 1 are repeating. 1 in 5 children in grade 1 are repeating. This is not an efficient system, but there's good news. And the good news is that early interventions can make a difference. This slide shows information from a study done in Jamaica. And this proves that very simple programs can bring stunted children up to the development level of their non-stunted peers. So that line on the top is non-stunted children, and the line just below that shows you the result of this program. The 2 components of this simple program were home visiting. So a trained home visitor would go to the home of at-risk mothers with their young infants and model good early childhood stimulation. How does that mother engage with her baby? The second component was a nutrition package to that family. And those 2 simple things brought the children right up to the level of their non-stunted peers within 24 months. And what I really found interesting about this slide, look at that 3rd line, stimulated. Even children who only received the home visit improved. In fact, they improved more than the children who only received nutrition. So this interaction of parents with their children is critical. Experience literally changes the brain. Isn't that remarkable? A baby's environment and care can increase or decrease the number of connections in their brain by up to 25%. In this slide, you see the synapses of a newborn, a 1-month-old, a 9-month-old, a 2-year-old, and an adult. And where do we see the biggest change? 0 to 2, the first 1,000 days. Look at the development of the brain during those first 2 years. And not so much afterwards between 2 and adulthood. The more connections there are in the brain, the greater the brain's ability to process information and to learn. So although we have risk factors here in Namibia, and we do have risk factors, we have disease such as HIV, we have poverty, we have alcoholism, we have domestic violence, we have maternal depression, which might be as high as 30%. So although we have risk factors, we also have very positive traditional child-rearing practices. We have breastfeeding. We have responding to infants who are crying. We have feeding on demand, carrying our babies, touching our babies, infant massage, storytelling, singing, reading. All of these are very positive traditional child-rearing practices that develop the brain and protect our children. I was recently in Rwanda, and what struck me while I was there, painted on the houses in very rural areas are geometric shapes in black and white, decorating the huts. And you know what? Young infants respond most to strong geometric shapes in black and white. And these aren't expensive books from the US, these are on rural huts in Rwanda. So we know how to rear children, and we know what the needs of children are. Relationships are among the most important experience that young children can have. And they have a particularly strong influence on emotional and social functioning. Remember the lines in the graph. Now, I love this picture, and it's not only because it's my granddaughter. It's also because we see a mother responding to her crying child. And what does she do? She turns to look at the child. She reaches out to touch the child. She starts making baby talk, which is universal in all societies to babies, and the baby calms down. We are genetically programmed to be responsive parents. We are genetically programmed to respond to children and infants in positive ways. And infants are genetically programmed to respond to their parents, to adults. When a baby's born in a hospital with the lights and the noise and the doctor and the monitor, does the baby look to the monitor? No. The baby finds the face of its mother, a human voice, a human touch. So don't be in too much of a hurry to give your children tablets. They need the human face. We also know that children mimic and mirror their parents from a very young age. Babies mimic and mirror, and parents do the same with their children. And this is not only mothers, fathers also have an important role to play in this. So if you want your children to listen to you, if you want your children to learn from you, if you want your children to follow in your footsteps, don't wait to engage with them when they're 6 or 10 or 12. Engage with your children now, and I'm speaking to fathers and mothers. And this develops grooves in the brain that allow for trust, understanding, and communication between people. So, investments, early investments, these early investments at the very start of life have a major impact, and they can address many of the challenges that we're facing in our country: inequality, poverty, violence. Investments made later will be less effective. This slide shows a very famous study done in 2007 about the rate of return on investments. And we can see where it makes the most difference in the early years. If we do not invest at that time, we've missed the window of opportunity to influence the structure of the brain, of personality, of cognition. And those moments actually are gone. Right now, as a nation, the investments we are making, you can see here in the slide, focus on primary, secondary, and tertiary education. And people say perhaps they're not paying off. I'm not suggesting to the new Ministry of Higher Education that we take away from higher education. But I am suggesting we need to invest more in our youngest citizens. We're neglecting these early years. And as we saw from Jamaica, it doesn't have to be necessarily huge amounts, but we have to invest if we want these later investments to yield results. What must we do? We have to act now, we have to act decisively at a national level and a personal level. We need nutrition programs for pregnant women and for women with young children. We need home visiting programs with trained community members who can go into homes with at-risk parents. young mothers, teenage mothers, mothers who have had HIV. We need to be visiting those homes. We need mothers' groups where marginalized and isolated women can meet together and get the support they need from each other. And we need subsidies for quality daycare for working women and preschools for all children, with a special focus on the poor who need that support. In this way, we can ensure that our society becomes more equal and that our children get the strongest start so they can go on and finish. At a personal level, I think the message to men is men, love the mothers of your children. The most important thing a father can do is to love the mother. And then go on and engage with your baby from an early age, right from the start. And women, avoid alcohol, avoid smoking, eat well, seek the support of other mothers who know and recognize your role as the first educator of this child. And parents, enjoy your children. Hug them, love them, kiss them, cuddle them, tickle them. This is not frivolous. This is an investment. So in summary, I would like to say that the flexibility and plasticity of the brain in the first years of life, in those first 1,000 days, and its capacity to grow lays the groundwork for future success. As Science magazine says here in this quote, an increase in thriving children over the next 15 years would lay a strong foundation for healthy, prosperous, and peaceful societies. It is difficult to see how the world could end poverty and inequality without addressing early childhood development. So I celebrate our 25 years of independence. We celebrate our new government and its first 1,000 days. And I encourage all of us to celebrate and protect the first 1,000 days of our children.